is a bit of a red flag and you probably shouldn't instruct them at all. Just saying. Hi everyone, welcome back to Chlome. I hope you're doing well. Today I wanted to do a bit of a reflection video and I wanted to document all the lessons I have learned from doing my first renovation. Now that the dust is truly settled, I wanted to share the things that I'd do differently, the things that I'd absolutely do again, and the things that cost me time, money, my sanity and lots of stress. So if you're planning your own renovation, grab yourself a pen, a notepad, because here are some of the things I wish someone had shared with me before I started on my journey. Lesson 1. Gut the house first and then bring in one main builder. If I had my time again, I'd gut the house as I initially did. I'd bring it back to bit brick, or at least at a stage in which someone could take over, and then I'd bring in one main contractor or one main builder to do the initial bulk work. So think things like anything structural, the rewire, the electrics, the plumbing, maybe even the plastering. Those initial things that 1, I can't do myself, but 2, I'd much rather get them done in one go. And then I take over to start managing the DIY bits that I'm comfortable with doing myself. So things like the mist coating, the painting, maybe some of the carpentry and the flooring, etc. It's so much more time and cost effective, and it also means you're not managing the chaos of having different trades coming and going at different phases, especially during those first and second fixes when you kind of need them to go and come at different times. It all becomes a lot to manage. Equally, when you've got different people working together who haven't done before, it leaves so much room for things to go wrong. And oftentimes when things do go wrong, they point the finger at each other. So ultimately, the person who has to bear the brunt of it and also the financial cost is the project manager, you. Not worth it. Of course, if you've got the budget, just get one person to do everything. I also appreciate, in my experience and also for the most part, that's quite unrealistic when you're starting out. So I think this balance almost strikes a happy medium where you get them to do the bulk and then you take over for what you can. And that's how I do it. Lesson number 2, always check insurance. I think it's really important at the start to always check your builder's insurance, the liability, and exactly what's covered, because it's so easy for them to do a shoddy job, disappear, and leave you to deal with the mess and the financial burden. It's something I didn't always do at the start, and it's really hard, I think, when you've got different trades you're managing for different things, some of them for really small, what may seem insignificant tasks, but I think checking all of those things up front is really important, and anyone who's not happy to share that with you or doesn't have one probably is a bit of a red flag and you probably shouldn't instruct them at all. Just saying. Another thing I noticed was that some of the builders would take on a larger piece of work, probably knowing up front that they couldn't deliver all of it. So they probably knew in their minds they could only take it to the halfway point, would probably expect to be paid up until that point, and would leave you with the mess and the fallout of having to finish off that job thereafter, which is so unfair and absolutely not right. And I actually think the building trade needs to be regulated so much more than it currently is, but that's a separate argument for another day. The point I'm making is now I check everyone's insurance beforehand, just so that I know exactly what's covered and how much for should anything go wrong. Obviously you don't want it to, but you need to know what that plan of action looks like should anything go wrong, and what that path to recourse looks like so you can get your money back. Lesson number 3, separate your budget. I think if you're planning your renovation, it's really important to set up a dedicated account specifically for the renovation budget. Every transfer, every payment, every invoice, keep those completely separate from your main account. It just makes reconciling all of those different transactions, even at a later date, so much easier. You have a clear audit trail of exactly what has been spent versus what you indeed have left, because that's also equally really important. I just think it clears up a lot of the faff because everything has its place. That way you have a very clear audit trail, you can look back on it retrospectively, and you can get a holistic view of everything. Lesson number 4, understand the remit of the surveyors. So something that I learned pretty early on is that the surveyors won't move furniture, they won't move wardrobes for instance, or lift carpets to assess what's beneath or behind them. And that's really important for you to know as a buyer, so you have the full scope of all the issues with the house. So ideally, if you can, get the sellers to move anything in advance, but oftentimes you just don't know what you don't know. Something I did was, when I got my report back from my surveyors, level 3 building surveyors, there were areas that were either limited accessibility or not accessible, one of them being the loft space. So I kindly reached out to the estate agent to book a second viewing to make sure that the surveyor could get access to those areas, those restricted areas. What that meant was the estate agent contacting the sellers to let them know these things need to be moved around in advance of that meeting. That way the surveyor could go in and check the walls for damp, for instance. Obviously there's certain things you just can't move out of the way, so inbuilt furniture for instance, but where you can, I think it's really important to. And if the seller isn't willing to move those things, it's probably a red flag that you should consider. What are they hiding? So definitely look out for limited accessibility, restricted accessibility, and see if you can work around that. Ultimately, you're paying for a service. You have to be settled in the decision. It's a huge decision buying a house. So make sure your surveyor can give you the full scope of everything that could be wrong or could go wrong with the house. Lesson number 5, dealing with the tradesman. So this one specifically goes out to the women, because something that I experienced as a woman, and a young woman at that, was that the tradesman can be so rude, so undermining, condescending, and just downright disrespectful. And I would get snarky comments like, do you want to check that with your parents? Or why don't you check with your dad? Run that past your dad. And I thought, why? Why would I? Why would I need to? It's my house. I'm project managing. It's my budget. I bought it, you know? And I was determined to prove them wrong. And I did to some extent. But it got to a point where I just thought, it's not worth it. Just pick your battles. This one is not worth it. These days, I just play the game. So if they prefer to speak to a man about it, so be it. I can muster one up and make one available. I think the point is, instead of me trying to change their ignorance or alter their ignorance, I kind of lean into it and I play my role accordingly. I'm not here to change their attitudes. I'm just here to get the job done. And in some respects, I think old Chloe would be like cringing at the thought, because I would say that I'm quite a feminist and I like to stand up for what's right, especially as it pertains to me and women and what that means and how we're treated. But I think there's also something in there, and there's a strength in there, and understanding you can't change the world or how people view women, but you can still get what you want from a situation and play to your strengths. And that's something that I do way more now. Also, small caveat, I would like to say I weed out anyone like that in the early stages, so quote stages for instance. So hopefully I just wouldn't hire that person, but we all know, and we've all been there, where you have the nicest person walk in and they promise you the world and they're almost just wolves in sheep clothing. I would like to say I weed them out quite early, but you just never know, right? So ultimately, play to your strengths. Don't take it personally at all. It's not worth it. Get the job done, keep it professional, move on. Lesson number 6, make a decision and then move on. Design indecision nearly finished me off, because I care so deeply about the design, probably too deeply. And perspective, when you haven't lived in a space, it's really hard to make some of those initial big design decisions. So think about socket placement. It's really hard to know where you want your sockets to be if you haven't even figured out where you want your bed to be, for instance, or your sofa and so forth. And then you've got things like tiles and paint colour, and if you're not careful, you can almost get stuck in a bit of a decision loop where you're constantly going round in circles. It's almost paralyzing, like mentally stuck. There are so many options out there, probably an overwhelm of options. So something that's worked quite well for me is I'll have a rough kind of idea of what I want. I'll look at it for a minute, but then it's really important to step back away from it and to revisit it with fresh eyes, maybe the next day or then the next couple of days. Have a rough outline and have a rough timeline to make your decision in, and then ultimately have a D-Day to make that decision. And once you've made that decision, move on, because otherwise, I mean, we're constantly evolving. So if I was still making some of the design decisions today, I'd have a completely different perspective, because I'm a new person, I'm ever evolving, right? You have to call time in it at some point. Don't get me wrong, this is something that I'm still really working on. I'm almost talking to you but talking to me at the same time. I'm such a perfectionist and I'm really working hard on not being that way. Done is better than perfect, and if you can get it 80% of the way there, you can move on, and it's absolutely fine. Those small intricate details really aren't gonna move the needle that much, so why waste time on it? So this is for me as much as it is for you. Make a decision, move on. Lesson number 7, trust your guts. Everyone is going to have opinions and advice, especially the tradesmen, and to some extent it's really important to be open to some of that advice, especially if you're new to a lot of this, but you have to make sure you don't make that the be all and end all, because some of these trades, for instance, aren't looking out for what's best for you, their client, but rather what's easiest for them. Take my house for instance, a lot of them were saying my bathroom and my ensuite layout just wasn't possible at all. Spoiler, we now know that's absolutely not true, because it's in there, it's perfect, it's fine. I went down a research rabbit hole trying to figure out what was what, from the joists and the soil stack and in what direction it needed to go. So I started to revisit some of those conversations from a place of knowledge rather than just seeking advice, and that way they were more inclined not to reject my proposal, because they knew they couldn't pull the wool over my eyes anymore. And I think that's really important. As much as you're new to it, you do need to have even a foundational level of knowledge, just so you can have that almost back and forth, and I think you kind of garner a bit more respect in the process. Always be open to advice, absolutely, but verify it. And if people say that things aren't possible at all, trust your gut, and if your gut tells you otherwise, just explore it. Lesson number 8, get the tradesmen to mark each other's homework. This for me was an absolute game changer towards the end. I wish I knew about it sooner. It happened quite organically for me after being messed around by quite a few of the tradesmen. Take my initial Sparky for instance. He came in, did a really bad job. I had to ask him to down tools and move on. I invited another electrician in to take over. When he was doing his tour, he kind of gave me feedback and he told me everything that was wrong with that initial job. One, because he probably just wanted to secure the job, right? But 2, it gave me a foundation knowledge of what was wrong versus what was right, versus what to look out for in future, and that for me was so important. So thereafter I started calling in different trades to check previous tradesmen's work, just to make sure everything was okay, and if everything was sound, there were no questions to raise. And also I was learning so much in the process. I was new to a lot of these works, so while I was learning fast, I was by no means an expert. So this strategy really helped me learn what good looks like from the professionals who do it for a living, and also helps me to keep everyone accountable. Lesson number 9, be careful how you give feedback. Oh my goodness, this is something that I learned quite early on, because confronting tradesmen in person can be really risky. And don't get me wrong, this isn't a blanket statement and this isn't all of them. For the most part, they should be able to take on that feedback, make the changes and move on, but it just isn't always the case. I've had a few who have been really defensive, really aggressive, and I think as a woman, especially in that environment, one of the main things you need to do and to prioritize is your safety. And I have seen so many stories online where people have ended up hurt, where things have been raised and they have gone left and it has escalated, and for me it's just not worth it, never worth it. So instead, if I do a site visit, I'll take photos and I'll follow up with an email instead with clear notes of what needs to be changed. I'll keep it professional, that way there's a clear audit trail of everything that's been said. I don't want this to be victim blaming at all, because ultimately it's not the client's fault if you've been put in harm's way, but I think the only thing that we can control is ourselves and our actions, and also how we respond to things. It's not worth being put in that situation over a tap or a tile. Take pictures, follow up in an email and take it from there. Lesson number 10, would I do it again? It's not really a question, is it? But it is something that I've been reflecting on, because at the time I would say absolutely never. It was brutal. It was so unpredictable, it was stressful, it was mentally and physically taxing. I think the hardest part for me was managing the people, the tradesmen, who were, like I say, just completely unpredictable, and I found it really hard reconciling, I suppose, what I wanted to do versus what I was getting out of it. I think now that the dust has settled and some time has passed, I think it would be an absolute shame to stop there and waste all of that experience and that knowledge that I've taken from this renovation. So now, I suppose upon reflection, I would say never say never. You just never know. Circumstances change, I might end up doing it with someone else, I don't know. I think ultimately you should never let people diminish your experience, and if it's something that you truly want to do, go for it. Do it again and do it differently. I will just say never say never. I'm sure I have way more lessons to share, but I think I'm going to leave it there. share. Let me know in the comments if there's anything specific that you've learned on your own renovation journeys or anything you'd like me to expand on. I am such a starter finisher, so if I start something I absolutely have to finish it, even if that does take me years, a really long time. I think that goes ahead and concludes this renovation series. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something from it and you can take away maybe some of the lessons that you've learned vicariously through me. Thank you so much for coming along this renovation journey with me. I've really enjoyed sharing this kind of piece and period of my life with you. Stay tuned because I'm sure I have way more exciting things coming soon. Until then, take care and I shall see you soon. Bye.